Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief of The Hill. I am joined today by my co-pilot, Rachel Frazen, The Hill's Energy and Environment Reporter. Thank you for joining us for our program today. Charging ahead, The Hill's EV and AV Summit. The Hill's second annual EV-AV Summit will explore the barriers to electric vehicle adoption, the future of autonomous vehicles, and the critical infrastructure needed to make them both a reality. A few housekeeping notes before we start. You can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag TheHillEVAV. And before we begin, a quick scene setter on where the two industries stand today. High gas prices have driven consumers to the electric vehicle market, but the price tag of electric vehicles remains an impediment to the Biden administration's goal for half of all new cars to be electric by 2030. Starting this year, a whole new wave of electric vehicles, from pickup trucks to sedans, will hit the market, coupled with tax incentives outlined in the Inflation Reduction Act. Overall, automakers have embraced the future of electric vehicles to provide cleaner and safer transportation. And smart, autonomous vehicles powered by AI could further transform our driving culture. The deployment of autonomous vehicles has not progressed as quickly as electric vehicle use. Proponents of autonomous vehicles argue they can save lives by removing human error and fatal car accidents, but the technology is hard to get right. It is estimated that autonomous vehicles would have to be driven hundreds of millions of miles to demonstrate their reliability, especially when it comes to fatalities and injuries. The public will be sharing the road with AVs in various stages of development for the foreseeable future, and charging stations will become common fixtures as electric car use increases. Federal regulators have been closely watching auto manufacturers rolling out self-driving vehicles onto city streets in recent years. My first guest is Congressman Bob Latta from Ohio, a senior member of the House Energy and Commerce Committee and co-chair of the Congressional Autonomous Vehicle Caucus. Welcome, Congressman.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I first want to ask you, as I mentioned, you're a senior member of the Energy and Commerce Committee. That's a very important committee with a vast jurisdiction. Obviously, the House flipped. What do you see the committee doing? What's on the committee's agenda for this Congress?
Well, first and foremost, I am very fortunate to be on Energy and Commerce. And one of the things I've always told folks, especially in our committee, is that when you sit up on that dais, especially with all the technology that we're talking about, we're looking over the horizon 5 to 10 years. Because again, we've got to make sure we get it right. Because when I've talked to the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the companies across this country, that they are much farther ahead than we are right now, especially when you're thinking about what the statute ought to be. So that's why it's so important that when we have these hearings, when we have our meetings, that we listen to the people out there that are out there who are innovating to get us to that next, over that next horizon.
Speaking on autonomous vehicles, why is it important to have a national framework on them?
Well, it's important because we can't really have 50 states and the District of Columbia coming up with their own. Because just think of it this way: you have an AV you're driving down an autonomous vehicle that you're driving down the road in, and you're getting close. And I'm from Ohio. You're getting close to the Michigan line, and the car says, you have 5 minutes before, or this car is going to pull itself off the side of the road and shut itself off because it can't cross the state line. So we've got to make sure that there's a preemption out there, that the federal government has the standards out there, because again, this is across this entire country, and we want to make sure that these vehicles, are going across. And the other problem is, how could a company out there or anybody else innovate with the idea that, okay, how am I going to come up with a standard that if I've got to meet 50 or in the District of Columbia, it just won't work? So we want to make sure that we get this done. We got to get it done right. Because again, when we look around the world, other countries are out there right now testing in this country. Right? China's testing out in California right now. So we want to make sure that we do it and get it done right in the United States.
As far as internationally compared to other countries, are we a little bit behind or a lot behind?
That's a good question, because I ask that all the time. Because again, we want the United States to be the leader in autonomous vehicles. Why do we want to have that? Well, first of all, a lot of people don't realize that when if you watch a football game or a basketball game on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and you watch some of the commercials, you'll see vehicles right now already at a level 2. because if you think about the braking, the staying within the lines, all these things are so important. And it's important also because what we want to make sure we have happen here. Number one, we've seen traffic deaths going up, not down in this country, and that we already know that 94% of all the accidents that occur are driver error. So we want to make sure that we get it done in this country. But again, we want the American people to understand that, wait a minute, this technology was developed here. You don't have to worry because, I've heard people say, I don't want my car to go flying off a cliff if all of a sudden some government someplace else or somebody can hack into it. So that's why in our legislation that we passed out of the Energy and Commerce Committee in the 115th, that's two Congresses back already, that we get it right again. And again, we want to make sure that, there's the privacy, there's the cybersecurity, all these things that we have built into it right now that we have worked on, that we got out of the House of Representatives. Unfortunately, it stalled over in the Senate, that we just have to make sure that we've got it, because again, we can do so much with this technology, not just on the life-saving side, but just think of, during COVID, for all the people that were shut in that might not have had transportation, they would have had that transportation from our seniors to people that might have a disability to be able to get from one point to another.
Are you hopeful? I know you've co-sponsored the Self-Drive Act. Are you hopeful that the new majority will be passing legislation on this topic, at least through the House, and then, obviously you don't control the Senate?
Well, in the Energy and Commerce Committee, it's one of our top goals that we want to make sure is, and, we have a lot of them out there when you think about energy and healthcare and telecommunications and on the self-drive side. But again, this is technology that we've got to get done. And, when back in the 115th Congress, we had over 300 staff meetings on this legislation alone. And I can't tell you how many meetings I had in Washington and back in Ohio and across the country to work on this legislation. But it's absolutely essential that we get it done and get it done in this Congress. And, I look forward to working with our friends over in the Senate once again. But this technology has to get out there because, again, it's from the life-saving to all the other things there's great potential for it out there. And we want to, as I said, it's got to be developed here in the United States.
In helping, how do you see it helping elderly or people who can't get around? It really could be a benefit for those people who can't just get into an Uber.
Well, to give you an example, my mom, who's passed away now, but my mother had a very severe eye problem her entire life. And so she depended on my dad, my sister, and me to make sure she could get to the store and any place else she had to go. And if you think about our seniors out there, all of a sudden, instead of being shut in, they had that opportunity to get around and still stay mobile. In the 115th, my vice chair of the committee, his son had a disability that if he wasn't home or if his wife wasn't home, his son couldn't get to work. So this is why it's important that we have this technology out there, and you see it's being developed. And one of the things I know that, thinking back over 4 years ago, I asked everybody that was working on this legislation on the AV side, are you where you thought you'd be 5 years ago and you look back and where you are today? And everybody said the exact same thing. No, we're much farther ahead than we ever thought we'd be. So, this technology is moving forward, and this is why we need to get it done.
That plays into my next question. I know, no one has a perfect crystal ball, but where do you see AVs and EVs in 10, 20 years?
Well, on the electric vehicle side, first of all, on the autonomous vehicle side, I think that's happening because we're seeing it being built in the vehicles right now. On the electric vehicle side, I think there's multiple things. The first question I'm always asked, what do you think about EVs? And I say this: I think the American consumer should pick what they want to drive. And the worst thing that could ever happen out there is for the federal government to come up with the winners and the losers. And if the federal government gets involved in this, I'll guarantee we're going to have a problem with picking those winners and losers. So this is really up to the market and making sure that the American people get what they want to have out there, what they want to drive.
As you know, there are skeptics of AVs, including some in the legal community as well as union officials. What do you think they need to realize, and what's the role of stakeholders in getting this country where it needs to be on this technology?
I think that there's always going to be skeptics out there, but I think the first thing is that you prove it. And when I've seen the technology change in the last 5 to 6 years, it's absolutely unbelievable. And when you watch you watch the commercials on TV and you see what these vehicles are capable of doing, the American people see it, that's there. Sometimes people say, oh, it's going to put people out of work because, you're going to have vehicles that can get some from point A to point B. Well, again, I think you're going to see, again, we're talking about from a level 1 to a level 5. A level 5 is when you get out there and you don't even have a steering wheel or brake or anything, and you're just truly a passenger in that vehicle. But I think that there's going to be plenty of work for everybody to do, because I think that what we're going to see is it's going to produce more jobs out there than we have today, because there's going to be all kinds of different things associated with it.
You have started an AV caucus with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, a Democrat from Michigan. I just wanted to get your sense of why was that started, what's on your agenda, and can there be a lot of bipartisanship on this issue?
Well, Debbie and I are good friends, and of course, we're right across the line from one another. And she being from Michigan, and I'm from Ohio, we're both from very large automobile states. And we want to see that technology developed in the United States. But we both understand that, where we can have it developed is even in our own backyards. When I think about what's happening in Ohio on autonomous vehicles, especially with what they call the TRC, which is northwest of Columbus, which is the Transportation Research Center, probably one of the highest developed sites of its kind in the country. And what they're doing over in Michigan, I know, was up there one of the sites that they were going to have online in the very distant near future. So there's a good working relationship, because we have, and again, AVs is, in my opinion, it's not a Republican, it's not a Democrat, or it's not an independent issue. It comes right down again to safety and keeping the United States in the forefront.
What do you tell, whether it's constituents or other people? It's fear is a big factor here. Once upon a time when elevators were invented, some people were scared of getting on elevators until after a while. What do you say to maybe your colleagues and constituents of, how they need to look at this issue? Because as we've seen with whether it's phones or televisions or anything else, the internet in particular, the technology improves.
Well, you're absolutely correct, because this is, just think about it this way. Columbus, Ohio is now designated as a smart city. Think about a day when all the vehicles will be driving, if you're in a 55-mile-an-hour area or 60 miles coming into Washington from the beltways, you don't have any stop and go. Everybody's going the exact same speed. The vehicles know when they need to exit, if you're going to be going off a ramp or whatever. I never forget when I was on 395 in a vehicle, and I asked this question because it was in, autonomous mode. Now, somebody was sitting behind the wheel, but we were going down. I said, what happens when the car is coming down the ramp? They said, just watch. Well, this car figured out real quick that it couldn't switch lanes, so it slowed up enough to let that car in. Then the next ramp we came up to, there wasn't anybody in the middle lane, so the car just moved over to let the car in. So you've got a very good flow of traffic going. So again, as I had mentioned, when you think about on the safety side, but it's also, think about on the energy side, you're not going to have cars stop. And then you tie this all into the future, when if all of a sudden you don't have cars at a stoplight going one way, the lights will all stay the same, and those cars will all keep proceeding in the direction that they're going at a certain speed. And you don't have, and again, you're not worried about all of a sudden that you're going to be braking or somebody's going to cut in front of you or anything like that. It's going to be a very steady flow of traffic, and then it's going to cut down on these traffic accidents, and you're going to get there faster, safer, and using less energy.
And do you get the sense that people are buying into that argument, especially as the safety concerns ease?
Well, again, I think what a lot of people don't realize, it's already built in a lot of people's vehicles that they have today. When you think about, going at a level 2, that it's, the braking or the staying within the lanes, or the making sure that if you're coming up to someone at a certain speed, that they're slowing down, and then you start slowing down. So these things are already being built in that a lot of people don't even realize when they put, they set that they're already they're running in a level 2 right off the bat.
That's a very good point. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks very much. Appreciate it.